the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Lining up Jewish Republicans for elections this year, a Broadway legend shares her story, comedy to save lives, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now on this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. At least one Jewish member of Congress won't be returning next January after losing a primary this week. Democrat Steve Rothman of New Jersey lost the bid to represent his party in the November election for a new district. Current sitting Congressman Bill Pascrell will lead the Democrats there, but there is still some chance this won't mean a drop in Jewish representation in Congress. The Republican candidate in the heavily Democratic district is Rabbi Shmuley Boteach. Another Jewish Republican going for a run at the House, who is seen as having a more realistic chance of winning, is Randy Altshuler of Suffolk County, New York. It will be a rematch between Altshuler and Democratic Congressman Tim Bishop. Altshuler lost to Bishop in 2010 by only 593 votes. Other Jewish Republicans hoping to make it into Congress this year include Florida's Adam Hasner and two Senate candidates, former Hawaii Governor Linda Lingle and Ohio State Treasurer Josh Mandel. If any of these Jewish Republicans wins their election, it would be a massive percentage increase in Jewish Republicans in Congress, as the total number of Jewish Republicans in Congress currently stands at 1, embodied in the person of Virginia Republican and Majority Leader Eric Cantor. But while many of these Jewish Republicans would likely oppose same-sex marriage, and Majority Leader Eric Cantor is well known for his Jewish observance, the Big C conservative movement in Judaism is moving toward greater recognition of same-sex marriage this week. The Rabbinical Assembly's Committee on Jewish Law and Standards, which only 6 years ago just barely passed a partial endorsement of conservative rabbis officiating at same-sex marriages and allowed gay and lesbian students to attend its flagship seminary, has this week officially released guidelines for same-sex marriage ceremonies, declaring that same-sex marriages have, quote, the same sense of holiness and joy as that expressed in heterosexual marriages. These guidelines were approved 13-0 with one abstention, a far cry from the conflicts over same-sex marriage in 2006 that saw members resigning and a narrow majority in favor of liberal reforms. But while you'll likely be seeing more same-sex marriages in the conservative movement in the near future, they aren't very likely to be those of love-struck young couples. The United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism has announced it is going to be ending support of its program for college youth, Koach, as it seeks to trim its budget while turning more of its attention to invigorating existing communities. Of course, when it comes to turning young people off of Judaism, nothing quite does it as well as spitting on them. In Israel this week, an ultra-Orthodox man was arrested for spitting on women in separate incidents in recent months. The man, 22-year-old Hananya Rabinovitz, is alleged to have spit on the young women because he felt they were dressed immodestly. But for women in the Israeli town of Beit Shemesh, dressing in a way that doesn't comport with ultra-Orthodox standards may no longer be an option, at least if you want to be able to eat. A new grocery store in the city is asking customers to cover up. A sign at the grocery store declares, Osher Ad serves a diverse clientele. Please help us respect all who come to the store, and when you enter, please come in modest dress. The sign is posted at a security guard stationed near the store's entrance, alongside a stack of black shawls. Security guards distribute the shawls to women deemed to be dressed immodestly. News reports later in the week have said that the supermarket removed the sign and stopped handing out shawls in response to protests. But dressing up differently can sometimes be a Jewish woman's calling, especially under the lights of Broadway. For one actress and philanthropist, it's been a fascinating journey, as Meredith Gansman reports.
What does it mean to have a life in the theater? Well, who better to ask than one actress and philanthropist who's been in it for the past 75 years. Just in time for the annual Tony Awards, I sat down with Jewish theater icon Phyllis Newman at her apartment on Central Park West, although she says it's not where she feels most at home.
When you're on stage, a live stage, it's different from film and television. I feel like I'm home, that's how you know that's where you belong, you know.
Since debuting on Broadway at the age of 9, Newman has been a fixture of the theater community. And 50 years ago, she won her first Tony Award as Best Supporting Actress in a Musical for her role in Subways Are for Sleeping.
Among the women who were in the same category was Barbra Streisand. And I was seated at a table with David Merrick, who was the producer of both my show, the show I was in, Subways Are for Sleeping, and I Can Get a Few Wholesale, that Barbra Streisand was in. And this is the truth, I've said it many times, but it's the absolute truth. Just as they were announcing the category, he turned to me and he said, "I voted for Barbra Streisand." And then 2 seconds later, they announced my name. And if ever there was a moment of, I mean, you know, just...
Right?
That was it, yeah.
Subways Are for Sleeping's lyrics were written by Newman's husband, Adolph Green, and his partner, Betty Comden. Newman and Green's love story, too, began in the theater.
Well, I'm so lucky because I met Adolph Green, my husband, when I auditioned to be Judy Holliday's Standby in Bells Are Ringing.
I'm going back where I can be me at the Bonjour Tristesse.
Finally, I got the part. And then I started, I was around the theater a lot because in those days, you know, we didn't have cell phones. We had smoke signals, but you had to hang around the theater till the second act. And Adolph came back and forth a lot because he was a good friend of Judy Holliday's and Sidney Chaplin. So I sort of had my eye on him, so I hung out till he asked me out. And then a couple of years later, we were married. And it was amazing, 2 careers in the theater.
To hear about Phyllis Newman's philanthropic work offstage, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Putting theater to a good cause is also the theme of this next story, where Christian Needon reports on comedy that's helping to save lives.
Laughter was the best medicine this week on Manhattan's Upper West Side, as the Halachic Organ Donor Society threw a comedy fundraiser at Stand Up New York Comedy Club, featuring 5 comedians cracking jokes for a good cause. And Society founder Robbie Berman said comedy was an appropriate way to raise awareness and money for organ donation in the Jewish community.
I used to be a stand-up comedian. I was a former comic, and I find that talking to people about death is not always a topic that people want to talk about. So I do my best when I lecture to throw in jokes and just not make light of it, but just deliver it in a way in which is enjoyable.
One of the night's comedians was Joel Chasnoff, who has brought his act to a Jewish Channel comedy special and also worked the first Halachic Organ Donor Society comedy fundraiser.
You'd think organ donations is sort of a somber subject, but it was a group of people who really care about the people and about this charity, and they were up for the comedy. It was in someone's living room, went really well, so now that they're having their second one, they brought me back.
Give it up for Robbie Berman, everyone. The worst intro I've ever had. Wasn't that like the crappiest intro for a comedian? Are you ready for him? But let's talk about organ donations real quick.
Chasnoff added that the society serves an important function in the Jewish community by raising awareness about organ donation.
I think most people are shocked that there is a Jewish basis for organ donation, and what they do is they have this poster with all these pretty well-known rabbis' pictures on it saying that they support organ donation. I think most Jews, though, it's not in their frame of mind. I think most Jews in America are thinking like, can I eat in this restaurant? Is it kosher? And not, can I give this liver?
To hear more about the Halachic Organ Donor Society, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Finally, saving lives before they're put at risk is the effort of a lab in Israel's Shaarei Tzedek Hospital that confronts the issue of Jewish genetic diseases with cutting-edge fertilization procedures.
Be fruitful and multiply. It's the first commandment in the Torah, and traditionally one of the most important Jewish values. But for couples who are carriers of genetic diseases, like Tay-Sachs, cystic fibrosis, or Gaucher disease, to name a few, having a child isn't so simple. Kibbutznik Oren Amir is a carrier of tuberous sclerosis, a genetic disorder that can cause severe neurological and other problems. His oldest daughter was diagnosed with the disease at 2 months old.
We realized she has some neurological problems. After a long stay at the hospital, we got to realize that we have a genetic problem.
Wanting to have more children who wouldn't be burdened with this disease, the Amirs spent several painful years trying unsuccessfully to conceive a healthy child naturally, until they found out about the PGD lab at Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem. PGD means pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, a process that's giving new hope to couples like the Amirs, who conceiving naturally can have a 25 or even as much as a 50% chance of having a child born with the genetic disease for which they are carriers. One of the world's leading PGD clinics, Shaare Zedek, recently celebrated the 200th healthy child born in the 7 years since it was founded. And TJC was there.
They were able to give us two amazing daughters, and we owe them the world.
PGD was developed by Dr. Yuri Verlinsky, a Russian-Jewish embryologist and geneticist and American immigrant who passed away in 2009. The PGD clinic at Shaare Zedek was established thanks to the philanthropic efforts of Rabbi David Fold and his wife Anita, who, in the interest of full disclosure, are close relatives of Eli Singer, the founder of TJC. Fold discovered Verlinsky's work in the early 2000s, when it had yet to be published, and proposed they work together to open a clinic in Jerusalem.
We needed extraordinarily sophisticated fertility medicine. We needed very superior genetics, and we needed medical ethics or Jewish law, halacha, to have its say. The only place that could combine the presence of all three of those faculties of the top shelf of super excellence was here in Shaare Zedek.
For more on PGD and the lab at Shaare Zedek Hospital in Jerusalem, watch the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Rebecca. In the interest of full disclosure, the man funding the program at Shaare Zedek, David Fold, is both a close relative of the Jewish Channel's CEO and the mohel who performed the brisses for both of my two sons. Thanks again for that. That's all for this week from all of us here at the Jewish Channel. Be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 291, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and now on Comcast Cable in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.